So one of the things that I really want to do is to give people an insight into who they're listening to. So I think it's really important that we look at your past and dive into what got you into the industry in the first place. What got you into clothing?
Yeah. What got me into clothing on a personal level was family. My parents were always, I guess my dad was more sartorial, but it was just my grandparents were very much into clothing. My great grandfather ran and owned cotton mills up in Manchester. So
Okay.
it could have been in the blood. I never met him.
Sure.
I'm simply named after him. So that's as connected as I get to cotton, really. But it was just kind of always there. But they were born in Lancashire, so you know you're up in that neck of the woods.
Cottonopolis.
Yeah, Cottonopolis, and just always liked clothes. Two older sisters, their boyfriends coming round at the time of Joy Division, etc. So I was probably always surrounded by lads, 16 upwards, that I can remember, that were very much into how they looked and the music they listened to. I was just little, so absorbing things by osmosis. Later down the line, I experienced the power that's pretty grand, but how your appearance changes the way people perceive you.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it was a good or a bad experience, that kind of got me really into thinking about clothes and how we look. And that was as a mid teenager. Fast forward a bit, you're then deciding what careers you're going to do. But I always wanted to go to business school. I wanted to be a rock climber. That actually led to business school, so I don't know how that segues, but I went to business school under the premise that you need to know how to run a business first. Not that university teaches that necessarily, but it was, it appeased the parents. And then I was in Manchester and got very much into clothes and the scene. Well, I was born in Nottingham, which had a very prevalent scene of fashion and menswear at the time, with Paul Smith and everything that shot off from that. Went to Manchester in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was just a hive of activity really for menswear and fashion, football up there, etc., etc. So there was a lot of that, and then just had ideas, always, that you do when you're young. I've just been writing something today about the ideals of youth, and you always think you can do it better.
Well, you don't know any other way.
Because you don't know anything. Yeah. So we're here today. But it just got me really into, I kind of loved everything about it. I loved the creative side of it. I really enjoyed the idea of the competitive side of things, because I think it is a bit of a competition, if you're on the high street or whatever, or you read, because you read the business pages and it's all about results and,
okay, yeah. So we're talking from a
metrics.
business perspective, yeah.
From a business perspective, and then it's kind of an art form, and then all the bits that are in between, and just period of time really that things were happening. I remember it from a real high street point of view, and that's like business school coming back. But Stuart Rose, who was running M&S, and then Philip Green, all of these names that now, fast forward 20 years, the repercussions of what they did probably weren't the best thing. But as a purely business thing, at the time, it was just record numbers and buying things up and buccaneering and all of these rag trade moguls that felt quite exciting. So I was just sort of enamored by all facets of fashion, actually, business. And
it's interesting that it's interesting how much of like kind of a piece of the pie the business side of things takes up with you. I think that's a really interesting kind of like direction that you've come to it from.
Yeah, well, I mean, my dad was an accountant as well.
Okay.
So my dad looked after entrepreneurs. So all of those little tentacles probably all make sense, all those intersections. I was surrounded by people doing their own thing. And then the business side of it, and that kind of mentorship from my dad saying, you need to run the business and XYZ, and actually made it sound very simple, and I overcomplicated it when I got into it, because you think you know better when you have your first go. But yeah, the business side of it, it kind of doesn't run if that's not there, or there's someone doing that for you.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I think which seems to be the way all these brands kind of push one person forward, and then there's someone behind them looking after, covering their back, looking at all the bits that need looking after. And I think that's a really interesting relationship, those two. And I think I've always been interested in that relationship of the duos that make up a successful brand, whatever it is, because they allow each other to do what they do really well, whilst actually enriching the other one.
Yeah. And because how did you go from, obviously you had an interest in clothing, and like I say, it's interesting you had that you were looking into the business side of things, and then obviously you did set up your own brand. So what was the decider there, like the catalyst?
Youth. I'd always wanted to, sitting in university in lectures going, why do I want to read old case studies of things that happened 15 years ago? And I was at uni at the time of the first .com boom. So there were brands like boo.com that were the precursors to all of these, all of the online stuff now, that got these huge valuations. We're going to revolutionize fashion. And it was just 15 years ahead. And then it kind of dropped back because it went bust, like massively went bust, because they overspent and did all this stuff. But sitting in lectures, reading those things, having ideas. Whilst at university, I started a skincare brand.
Okay.
So I was always interested in doing things, but clothes were actually my real interest. And I think because of how they can make you feel and others feel. And I don't know if you were the same, because we both passed through Nottingham, but being in skate shops, being in fashion stores, just on a Saturday, chatting to, your mates who are working there, just felt really good, didn't it? People like to look good.
Yeah. I mean, I do remember you talk about skate shops. I do remember that time when I was heavily into skating, and it's the furthest from sartorial that you could get, especially at that time, because it was all shell suits that were cool at the time. But it was you're still putting yourself together to represent a certain look.
Yeah. There's a culture to it. I think that's, and I've never actually really been in the cultures of anything, which I wrestle with to this day, because it's like, I shouldn't necessarily be there, but I've been a participant of them, but probably always wanting to do my own thing. That's a prevalent thing throughout everything that I've done, just wanting to do it one's own way or my own way, which then led to me starting a brand, which I worked for a sports brand prior to that. Left uni, worked for a sports brand, got really lucky with them, because we worked on collaborations and just got all this young rising talent who then went on to do amazing things. So it's just a great first job. First week I was in Paris at trade shows. Second week I was in Berlin. So it was just amazing. It was like, oh my God, really found myself here. But I always I always had this idea, which then became Albam, the brand that I founded. It was always there, and then it was just a matter of time. And there's a story to that, which a year later I left and did it.
So it was a year. So it was a year with the sports company before you then set up Albam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so how far, once you founded or co-founded Albam, then it was how long between the co-founding it and then having a retail store? Like there's obviously a story there.
There is. We left in, when did I quit? 2000 and 2005, and then we launched in 2006. It was about a 12-month period, where it was like, okay, can we launch it? And then it was about 7 or 8 months after that launch that we opened the first store.
That's quick. To me, in my head, that seems quick. What did it feel like at the time?
It felt like a long time.
Huh.
The longest time was we launched on 5th of December 2006. Oh, that's when the website went live. And we were sending out our catalogues, which I found one the other day, and I can't find it now when I was sorting out the studio. Christmas or Boxing Day 2006, we were having crisis talks because it wasn't it was so underwhelming. It was soul destroying.
Right.
Because, well, A, we were 25 and 26 at the time, so really young. You have no bearing on what people are doing other than seeing people selling out, doing 6 figures, 7 figures, huge profits, huge turnovers, because that's what's reported. What isn't reported really is any of the year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years before that, when it's not got any traction. Mm-hmm. So we were like, Christ, we thought you launched online 2005, 2006. None of us knew, like Alan or I knew nothing other than, you put you have a website and then the world will see it and the world will buy from it. Well, only if they can see that you can buy from it, and only if they know that you're there. Otherwise, no one sees you. So that was a long time. That sort of, 19 days between launch and Boxing Day was like, this is, after like your mum's bought a shirt or, your family have bought the things, you want real sales. It was dire.
But what a crazy time to launch. Like you launched, 18 days before Christmas. Like when you think about it that way, have I got that right?
Yeah. Well, we knew no different, and we probably wanted to launch it sooner, but things go back. But, so we kind of put these expectations on it that weren't met to start with. They just weren't met. But it, looking back on it, if you asked an expert, but we weren't experts and we didn't ask any experts. We just, even making clothes, we weren't experts. Like working for a big brand, which is a big machine, which has all of the departments that you're not really privy to because they're working with a factory, that's overseas or whatever.
Things just happen.
Things just happen. Or don't, and then you write an email to someone going, why hasn't this happened? Make it happen, please. We have a deadline. So you don't see all of the intricacies of the thing, and you also have big company budgets, departments doing it, all of this expertise, traction. The brand that I work for was like 100, or it's coming up to now 100-year anniversary. This year's its 100th year anniversary, so it was like 85 years old at the time. It's got a history, it's got a whole network, it's turning over hundreds of millions. Stuff that you just don't see because you don't. It exists, it already exists. So was it crazy? I don't know. Well, it wasn't at the time. We did it.
Yeah, and it's that whole you don't know what you don't know.
You really
and at that age, and actually I think that there's plenty of 25, 26-year-olds now who will have a lot of that knowledge because there's so much out there. You're bombarded with it. If you look on TikTok or Instagram, there are experts giving this information away, which we essentially are, that just didn't exist then. You just didn't have access to that knowledge.
Yeah, that's true. And I think there's information, there's knowledge, and there's wisdom, and it passes through. I think information's everywhere, and there is a lot out there, and you can find a list of factories, all of which will be good factories. 99.9% of them might not work well with you, but they're all good they're all great factories. They all make a great product. And I think there's wisdom, which I think is the experiential side of which comes with time, is being able to read the list and going, okay, I'm going to pick this 0.1% or this 0.2%, and this is where we'll go, because you can ask the right questions. And I think those questions mean something when you have the experience, because you can hear things. Or fast forward to now, I hear many like friends that call me up and they want to start something and they can't hear, or you explain to someone that there will be these issues that you'll just have to navigate around. And that's not saying to not do it, because I think it's a really exciting thing to go and do something. Is being able to hear. I think that's probably the biggest skill, being able to hear and discern between information, knowledge, and wisdom, and being able to apply information, knowledge, and wisdom to the thing that you want to do. Because it takes real humility to take those and move forward with them without losing naivety and that drive that comes with naivety. There's a bit of a balance.
There is, isn't there? And I think, so would you say that, do you think wisdom is information rooted in knowledge?
Yeah, and experience.
And experience,
I think time under tension gives you a lot of... it can burn you out, or it can give you some real time... what's the word? Ways to apply it. Ways to apply that information. Because you can ask someone a question, they give you an answer, but the answer... I don't necessarily feel the answer actually means too much, because the experience isn't there to understand the answer.
Yeah.
And move forward with it.
Yeah. And so you set up Albam.
Set up Albam.
2006.
Yeah.
And then
started walking the path 2005. Launched it 2006, December 2006. Opened the first store August, September 2007.
Okay. And where was that store?
That was in central London, in just off Carnaby Street in Soho.
And so, because you, as you say, so you grew up in Nottingham, and then so why did you choose London?
We chose London because Al, my co-founder and biz partner at the time, worked for a leisure group, two self-made guys that had, people of a certain vintage will remember a chain of vodka bars around the country, and they were great. And he said, if I was you, I would... Well, I got a bit of advice from another rag trade guy who's got a really successful business. He was like, quit your job and go and do it, because if you don't go and do it, you'll never know. And that was a great thing for me to hear at the time, age 24. He'd said that, I think, because of my age. Wouldn't necessarily say that to someone 20 years on, 45. And then Al, I remember chatting to, I think his name was Roy or Neil, and one of them said, if I was you, I'd go down. I remember his words. They were quite fragrant, or whatever the word is. So I'm précis. He was swearing a lot, as he did,
gotcha.
But in a nice way. He said, go down to London. If I was you, I'd get a store on Oxford Street, the biggest one you can afford, cram it full of product, and you'll either sink or swim. That's what he did. He said, don't waste your time with opening a small store in a small place. Just go all out and go, because you want to find out, if you're going to fail, find out as quickly as possible what doesn't work. And we'd been to Nottingham, and we were looking around stores, and it was like, oh my god, this could be like, this is like 500 quid a month, and you're like, yeah, but you probably struggle to take 500 quid a week, kind of thing. So then we went down to London. It was like, okay, maybe this is it. Let's just have a look, and that kind of gave us a bit of confidence, really, and being like listening to that.
But that must have been, yeah. But as you say, so you're looking at Nottingham and you're looking at £500 a month, that sort of figure. It's well, we're talking 20 years ago, but nevertheless, that's digestible as a 24, 25-year-old. I'm assuming London, you're probably looking at triple those costs, if not more.
London was triple. At least, what was it? I can't remember. It was like 30 grand a year or something to start with. But you just see the volume of people. And we also didn't really know anything. Like, we didn't know how to get a commercial property. We didn't know all of this, all of the stuff that there'll be courses on. And like you say, there's information on all of it. And there weren't really pop-up shops. And there weren't these things, these mechanisms. There was a mechanism called a license, and we had a great landlord, and they were a big property company, and they owned kind of all of that area. And they were very much wanting to get young blood in with established brands.
Okay.
And
nice.
And they kind of said, well, that street, and we didn't know this until this is me looking back on it. They were like, that street, which was Beak Street, is for independents and startups and boutiques, and then Carnaby Street's the main drag, that's where your Pumas and your Levi's etc. will go. So they were showing us around various spots that we didn't really like because they had they were off the main streets, and we walked past 23 Beak Street, and it was up a couple of stairs. It was like everything was wrong about it. The door was too narrow, but it just looked like, what's this? And I remember saying to John, I was like, what's this? And he's like, oh, that's available. And we were like, we'll take this one. And we didn't have any money at the time, but we knew that we just had to do it. And then you had to give a presentation to the property company with their board of directors. They kind of all vetted you, and it was great. Like, they were, but then it also reminded me of being around my dad's clients. And a great bit of advice I got years ago when I was 13 and I was raising money for something. A guy was like, how much do you want? Because the answer will either be yes or no. So don't worry about that. So that was this bit lodged in, and,
Just expand on that a little bit more. So he's saying, like, the answer will either be yes or no. So so basically ask for what you want.
Ask for what you want. Yeah, because then someone knows if they can give it to you. And if you're asking the right people, well, the answer will be yes or no. Like, so don't go cap in hand. It was like, what do you want? I can't say yes or no if I don't know what you want. And it was just like, we're going to do this. And they asked us a question, the property directors, which was, why should we give it to you? And I remember Al and I saying, because we're going to be the next best thing. Like, we're going to be the next biggest thing. And they were like, okay, cool. Like,
Is this that belief? The belief of youth.
I think that belief, but the belief of youth probably still say the same thing, but it sounds different 20 years on.
But we got the shop. Saying that though, so you got the shop, and how long because you ended up selling Albam, but how long did Albam last for under your and Al's leadership?
I was out after a 2012.
Yep.
Which seemed like a lot longer. 2012, 2013.
Okay, so it was 6 or 7 years.
6 or 7 years. We did really well. Like, notoriety was fantastic. We had a really good reputation. Phases of it, we did, financially it was good, but we were growing. And have experiences of that, and we did it with so little money.
Well, I was going to ask, because I want to know there's the story that I know, but about the first jeans that and that whole process, because I think that speaks to a certain approach that I think is really valuable. So give us a bit of insight with that.
About the jeans, or about
the jeans, about how you made that happen, essentially.
Well, we started with the idea for our album was a capsule wardrobe, and based around jeans and a white t-shirt, a story that we'll come back to later on in our conversations. But we put together a catalogue, which dates us straight away. And a capsule wardrobe, you need legs. You need, otherwise it's just a range of tops. And we wanted to do jeans, but the minimums were so big we couldn't afford to do them. But we had the samples made. So when we launched in 2006, they were out of stock. It was like straight away out of stock, which is amazing. It's like
because you didn't have any stock.
Because we didn't have them, so we just called it out of stock. But we didn't add in a drop down. You know, on the drop downs it will say, size 28 out of stock. We didn't say size 20 out of stock because we can't afford to make them. It was just out of stock. And then it was like, leave your email address so we can let you know when they come back in. And then we kind of milked that with ideas going, we need, as we got followers and people signing up, we would keep them updated going, first batch is sold out. We'll, as soon as they come back in again, we'll, you're on the list, and we just can't keep these in stock. And it was when we opened the first store that we then needed to get some more product in, and we had a great factory in the UK, and they had some dead stock denim. So we were like, we'll just make whatever you can get out of the fabric that's in those rolls, we'll take. And it was great. It was all Japanese denim, selvage. It's a black and a blue. We got like 14 pairs of black and 14 pairs of blue, like not huge quantities, but then they could come back in stock, which was quite exciting. It's like,
well, and
they're back in stock.
You already had the demonstration of the interest, because people had signed up with their emails to tell you which ones they were interested in. So,
but then when we opened the store, we sold them out in the store kind of quicker than we sold them out online. At that point, it didn't really matter. It ended up becoming a really good line for us, and our jeans, from that, it gave us the confidence. The fit was good, and lots of that stuff was, even the pattern was a found pattern at a factory because we couldn't afford to do it. So it's like, we'll just make that, what pattern have you got lying around that would work? And the factory owner said, oh, this one. And then we did it. So there were lots of elements of luck that we did, and it's amazing how people take things on what they see, not always the reality of the journey behind it. If you don't want to share it, or the bits that don't sound as glamorous, because it's storytelling, and brands become storytelling. But the product was good. Like, it wasn't that
sure.
The product wasn't very good. It stood up. Although looking back at the product now, it wouldn't pass for me as a first sample, but that's just age and experience, and you can make it better.
Well, I often say, I think, and I'm not the only person to say it, of course, but a good product is the price of admission, and then it's everything else that you layer on top of that. But it's also, I think, it's what a good product is to you, because if you accept there's no such thing as perfect, then, because what fits me and suits me well, especially with so many different body types, isn't going to work for someone else. So the way I approach it is, it has to be right for me. Then I can hold my head up high and know, no, this is a good product. I know it's good. If it doesn't fit you, if it doesn't work for you, if it's not right for you, that's fine. That's very subjective, but I know it's a good product.
Yeah, there are so many conversations or perspectives and views on products. I think if you are happy with it, we were so amazed as we opened this store in central London that people were buying the product, not because we didn't believe in what we were doing, but it was just an amazing feeling to have. It's like, wow, we've arrived in the smoke with some clothes, and then you have the real problems of, oh, we've sold out of that, we need to get more made, and then how you're managing that. And it was a great time, loved it. Super.
Well, especially with the retail space, when you've got 30 grand a year to cover, and then if you've sold out of jeans and people are walking in and you're seeing that 30 grand, you could see it being chipped away at, and people buying stuff. But if you don't have the product, and it's got at least a 6-week lead time or something like that, depending on the relationship with your factory and where you can fit in, that's scary stuff, especially for kids, really.
It's scary stuff, especially when you don't really, you understand the idea and the concept of margins, but you don't necessarily understand what that means. And I think that's the information, knowledge and wisdom thing. Like, you can go, oh, we've got a good margin, or what's your markup? But it's like cash margins and percentage margins, all of these things where you're just trying to juggle loads of plates to get it through. And the best plan in the world on paper doesn't necessarily correlate to the best plan in reality, and all of that stuff. So yeah, we were learning on the job, and also wanting things to be a good price so people could afford them. And price then became an interesting concept, price and quality. Then you're making things, etc., etc. So.
Okay, so tell me again, you were running Albam in London in the retail store, and when did you? Because how did that come to a close for you?
Well, we got to 4 stores. We were trying to open like 1 a year. And like I said previously, we did it on so little money, actually. So we were kind of underfunded from the start and running at this thing, but we developed a good reputation. And also that idea of margins, we didn't have it in the bank in a way to keep it going through. So when you hit a problem, things start to get, the turbulence hits you a bit harder.
Yeah. If you've got the money, you can almost you can use the money to soften out the waves. But if you don't have the money, then they just accelerate and accelerate.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's natural because you're learning so much. And I think now people try and be so calculated, and it often doesn't. It just doesn't work like that. In my opinion, it doesn't work like that. That you can soften it out. Like, it will come for you at some point, and it'll be the thing that you don't realize because you don't know what you don't know that kind of knocks you sideways. So it was about building a business that was and is, I think, able to withstand shocks. So I was exhausted. I wanted to do some other things. The markets were not changing but evolving, and I could see other things emerging. The rise of sportswear, which is all changing kind of trends and styles, is always interesting for brands that appeal to a certain person, because whether you adapt and evolve with that, or you stick with it. So there were sort of differences of like the routes we could go down, but I was really excited about what was happening in sport and fitness, coupled with needing a bit of time off, which I think we all do, and yeah, decided to actually, I think it's time for a new part of me and the journey of it. And with those learnings, like, actually, I got offered an interesting consultancy with a bigger brand that was turning itself around, and that was interesting. Like wanting to see it from inside a big brand, because they were like, we want to do what you've done. So taking that knowledge and that experience into a bigger outfit, which doesn't always work, but I wanted to have those experiences of being there, somewhere uncomfortable, but all actually, looking back on them, quite enriching. So it's just now's time to move.
As much as clearly you have an entrepreneurial spirit, it didn't pass me by that you said that you were speaking to some of your dad's friends to raise capital when you were 13. But there is the entrepreneurial journey is turbulent and it does have ups and downs, and the last thing it is stable. And so I'm assuming as well there was a draw towards some stability with the consultancy job for somebody else.
Both, like a balance of stability and adventure. And I think that's for me something that I'm probably looking for, that you can go away on these adventures, and then return to stability, like knowing where your home is, kind of thing. It's nice to be able to return, and I think that's maybe a good part of goals and goal setting, which you only know it's uncomfortable when you've experienced discomfort. Otherwise, it's just this, again, it's this idea that you don't really know. Like, I understand discomfort as a concept, but then you experience it and your level of tolerance for discomfort is much more than you think it is.
Through experience.
Through experience, you know,
Yeah.
and then so all of those just started to change. But it was a really great opportunity that I was given. Got me an insight into how a different level works, because when you're making all the decisions yourself, that's one thing. And then when other people are making decisions, and they're not always great decisions, but they're based on kind of their experience and what they think. But I feel really fortunate in that I was in a small business. You get to see all parts, adjusting the length on someone's jeans and making, pinning them for alterations, as well as being in the factory, as well as reading management accounts, as well as closing the shop up. They're all great things, and I don't think actually the business is any different to a large degree, whether it's a small outfit or a really big outfit. You just have more people in between, and just having an understanding, actually, of you can be sympathetic, or is it empathetic, but no less discerning, not necessarily being a pushover. It's like,
Yeah, okay, yeah, understanding where someone's coming from. But yeah,
yeah, and make a call on going, okay, we don't have to push this. We can. This decision will be okay. Like, a factory is very good at doing something, and they're not good at doing another thing, like a technique. Don't push them on the technique they're not very good at, because you're going to get further problems down the line, and really, it won't make the product inferior. It might not be perfect as you've envisioned it, or someone's envisioned this thing to be drawn out and flat on a screen, but life isn't flat and drawn out on a screen. It's, it's lived in. There are creases and crumples and etc., etc.
And compromise.
And compromise, yeah, and being resolved with compromise. And it actually, a guy that I worked with, when we were at Albam, we worked with a coach, an NLP coach, neuro-linguistic programming coach, and he was available to anyone in the company. And we got to like 40 people headcount, and because we were like, it's really important that people have that ability. Like, if we're going to move at pace, then everyone needs to be able to speak the same similar language, and also understand what they want to do with their life, and have those conversations, because otherwise you end up standing in the store going, not really asked, because, oh, well, I'm really a photographer, and it's like, yeah, but on Saturday when you're rotated on, it's really important. You are our star player in that place, so to be able to see it. But he talked about Disney, and I don't know if you've heard this model at Disney. There was the dream, the accountant, and then the dream, the creative, like the account manager and the accountant. There were those four things, and the only person that can touch the dream is the creative. No one else can touch the dream, and that's what everyone's going towards. The only way the accountant can touch the dream is by speaking to the account manager, and maybe there wasn't the account manager, but speaking to the creative. So the creative has to come up with a better solution to envisage the dream. And that's how we were trying to think about product and make product. So
the dream is the dream is never negatively impacted. It's how do we how do we find the solutions to actually achieve that?
Yeah. So, and it's really easy, certainly with clothes. Or you put everything on a spreadsheet and you go, oh, we'll just take 10% off. Let's make it 10% cheaper, and then you start to, well, you can get really lazy with sourcing. So you just find a button that's cheaper, but you've lost the character of it, and all of a sudden the product doesn't look that special. If it doesn't look that special, I believe it doesn't then really sell, and I think that's often a big issue when you go into somewhere and you're like, oh, there's nothing to buy, because nothing's like wowing you.
And the salesperson isn't wowed. If they know that it's just bog standard, they're not applying that thought process to you.
Yeah. And then, and our album product did have a certain weight, in inverted commas, as someone, it was this NLP guy said, actually, who was a customer. We found him because he was a customer, and he liked what we were doing and said this is what he did. But he said there was a real weight to it. Like you could almost feel there weren't compromises to it. What we should have done is increase the price. That was our lack of wisdom, because if we'd increased the price, we would have increased the margin. That would have changed the business in its entirety, and we could stand by the increase in the price.
Yeah,
because the value
remains high. Yeah.
And I put that down to an age thing, as a confidence, because you're like, oh, you just want everyone to buy it, and we, this, that, and the other. But that's also the dance that you play in a business. You're constantly managing that perception. It is,
but I think especially within clothing, like they talk about the enshittification of products over this cost of living crisis, especially. And it's, you might have bought a pair of jeans, say 15 years ago. Let's say 10 years ago, you bought a pair of jeans and they were £95. Pair of Levi's, £95. Well, you go to buy another pair of Levi's, you want to pay £95. But of course, with inflation, with cost increases, all that sort of stuff, you should be paying £175. But they keep the prices the same, and the only way to do it is to drop the standard of the product. So that's a real problem now, and you can see it rolling out on a smaller business.
And when you change the margins, I was looking at a fabric this last week and speaking to the mill owner, and they sent through the prices, and it was like, oh wow, that's their clients are the luxury goods brands, the luxury brands, and like you can see the price. They got the price from the factory, add on the price of the fabric, times it by a markup that is what I think businesses should do, which is a 5 markup from cost of goods. And you're like, oh wow, that's why clothes get so expensive. It suddenly went to 4 figures, and you're like, oh wow, that's but times every pound by 5, and it jumps very quick. It suddenly goes.
But I think that there's, this is a different discussion entirely, but there are so many hidden costs that people don't see, that I didn't see until I was actually involved in the industry, where the idea of a 5 or 6 times markup seems greedy when you don't know. And then when you start looking into just how disparate the environment is that you have to work in to create one piece of clothing. If one piece of clothing requires 5 different fabrics with interfacings and linings and then the outer and buttons and all that sort of stuff, you're looking at so many different factories, different places, logistics each way, taxes each way. It adds up very, very quickly. But so then, because Albam still exists, I got an advert for it the other day.
Yeah. Then that got, as things do, I think when you start that selling process, then things start to have a life, and then it has a life with someone else, and then a life with someone else, and a life with someone else. And I think that's just the nature. It's the nature, I think, of the clothing business. Anyway, certainly under it's guys GUISE. Because there are like groups that just like an idea, nice brand starts, and then just over time it will end up in the hands of one or two of those, not what it was when it started, and that's something that has to be resolved because it can happen, and then it becomes enshittified because it falls into someone else's business model and another.
Because the passion isn't behind it, but the accountant is, because it's been bought to make a profit. But what I think is fascinating is, even with that in mind, is that some years later, there is clearly still value in the brand Albam, because if there wasn't value, it would have been swallowed by something else and dropped. You know, these corporations or these groups that buy up smaller businesses. When I was working for ADIO was owned by K2. K2 then got bought up by, I don't know, the Crockpot was, you know, their main thing, right? So of course they have no interest in skate shoes, and they look at it and they're like, well, this company only turns over between 10 and 12 million a year, whatever, and it just gets dropped or licensed out or something like that. So it's great to see that initial direction that you guys created with Albam has retained value today, and I think that's a really important thing, and it's something to be really proud of.
Yeah, looking back on it, I am now. I think when you go through that middle bit, then you don't want anything to do with it, and you're just trying to find your feet again, because you put so much energy into it, and then but now I look back on it and you can say all those things. I think with that wisdom of like experience, and you're like, yeah, okay, you know, that was a great time. Things change. Would I want to be there now? No, because I'm not. It's not my personality type to be in a company like that. Actually, I would much rather be like the person that owns the whole group. Maybe not in personality wise, but you know, because I think there are different types of people that start things, and then you have different personality traits, and I think a lot of that's luck, like right place, right time.
Yeah, true. But you're driven. So are you saying you're essentially driven to be in control? Does that does that seem fair?
Possibly. I would like. I'm driven by communicating, verbalizing, like making something that of how I see a way of doing things.
Could I shorten that? Would it make sense to? And again, I'm putting words into your mouth, but like bringing a vision to life.
Bringing a vision to life. Because the people I've realized, like looking back at all the people that really inspired me, they had a point of view, and actually all the point of views, they were all connected. They might visually, aesthetically look totally different. They might have been in different industries, but when I read interviews with them, they were all quite singular people doing this thing, and it could have equally failed as much as it equally worked for them, but they kept going at it, and I find that part really I find it really exciting. It's
inspiring
like
as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm definitely inspired by it, because it's that kind of like, it's almost, and funny because I'm not into gambling at all, but it is a gamble, because you're putting so many hours and so much time and money into bringing that vision to life, and you might bring it to life and other people might resonate with it, and therefore it's successful, or they may not, or your timing might be wrong. But it's a gamble, and I think it's an informed gamble, because the more little pieces of you and pieces of the idea you can put out, then you can start to get see who is resonating. You can start to get feedback from it. But I think it's very easy to be. It's fun. It's funny. It's funny because I think you can be equally blinkered to the potential failings as you are to the potential successes at any given moment. You know, I can go. I'm almost schizophrenic, because one minute I can be like, there's no way Barnfield's going to fail. Like it's great. There's there's a market for it. There's quality product. Blah 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 blah. It's all working. And then 5 minutes later, I can be like, why would anyone buy that? I have no idea why anyone would resonate with that. I'm clearly not getting in front of the right people.
They're natural. I think they're natural emotions, and it's navigating those, isn't it? It's kind of riding it through, and because you have to be real about things, but I also want to go for it. It's like, if I believe in it, and I feel it can work, and I've got something to say, and I'm not, although I'm talking, loads here, I tend to not speak unless I've got something to say. I might not always know the best way of saying it, but otherwise I just tend to not speak. So then it's like, it's reminding myself that actually I have got something to say, and I want to say it, and it's very easy to not. Rather than just like making stuff, it'd be really easy to make stuff. But all the things that I've made follow a very similar principle, and that's been interesting to look back on and reflect on.
Yeah. So you went from Albam.
Yep.
Was bought. You went into consultancy for somebody else, but then after that you started consulting. Was that consultancy that you were working for someone else? Was that in the UK, or were you in Portugal at that point?
That was in the UK.
That was in the UK.
I'm in Portugal now, partly because of COVID, and then partly because Albam was making in Portugal. So my experience of manufacturing has always been in Portugal, the UK, and a bit in Italy. Never really Far East, because again, when I was at the sports brand, there was another department doing that, and I was in marketing. So I never got involved in that. So my experience has come through relationships in Portugal. But consulting for that brand, that they were based in the UK, we put some production in Portugal. They had Eastern Europe, they had production, but now I'm based in Portugal, because life and other things, but it's also for my connections. It works.
Yeah. And so tell me about that. Like, what does a day look like, or what does a month look like with consulting in Portugal?
Very different from 1 month to the next. It depends kind of on the calendar cycle of a client I'm working with, like when they're going through production. For example, if a client comes to me, they might want to do something. They've either got a collection or they've got an idea for development. So a lot of the work I do tends to be with young brands up to a certain size, because they like my history with Albam and working from zero up to about 5 million. Couldn't go beyond that, because then it's just bolting on numbers, but factories start to shift and change, and you go further east when you seek that.
Sure.
But it could be anything from they know exactly what they want to do, and they're simply looking for the right factory to help them, the right partner to help them make it, or they're just looking for a factory to make it. And the difference between a factory and a partner factory would be that the factory's kind of a one-hit thing, and they just want to bang this thing through. Or it could be more development with the brands, and then getting the products from the idea that they've got, prototyped, sampled, adjusted, and invariably that looks slightly different. It should look better when it gets to the final product ready to go, which they either then sell or they go straight to production with. So I work, because of my experience really, they come to me for factories and those relationships, kind of like a matchmaking service.
Sure. But do you tend to find that the people you're working with, do they come to you with like fully fledged ideas and tech packs and graded dimensions, all that sort of stuff, or are you having to lead them through that as well?
Bit of both. With the kind of Instagram brands coming out, they kind of have a following, and then they have an idea to make something. But it might be, we want to make underwear, but they don't have any tech packs. They don't have any really knowledge of what they're wanting to do, but they want to assign a product to monetize their following. You know, it could be a baseball cap, could be this, that, or the other. Or they've got an idea for starting a brand. I love the outdoors and I want to start a brand. And you're like, okay, you know, got this idea. And again, you can work with them and say, look, this is going to cost this, and this is going to be your liability. Which to start with, it's like, oh yeah, don't worry, I've got investment for, you know, I've got investment, etc., etc. And you're like, money burns really fast when you start making things, and numbers on a spreadsheet don't really mean anything until you have to make that bank transfer, and you're like, wow, that leaves me with nothing there, and there are no sales. All of these things, like in the moment.
Because you have no idea that it's going to take you 5 samples to get to, especially, you know, if you have a specific vision but not the experience of how to get there or communicate it.
Yeah, and it takes longer than you think.
Yeah, it does.
You know, as we know. And sometimes I'll say, you know, I think you should make this because this factory does this really well. And it wouldn't, you know, you want to make it in a certain way, but it's like, actually, if you can not compromise your dream, but give us flexibility to make it in a different way that perhaps you didn't know, because you don't know what you don't know, you'll come out with a product that you're like, oh wow, that's really cool, and it's done in a better way to produce it. It comes through quicker. If it comes through quicker, you can sell it quicker, you can get cash in the bank quicker, all of those things, rather than it's got to be like this, and you're like, we're just going to we are going to hit roadblocks all the way. Like if it has to be a 100-piece collection, or it has to be made in a certain way, but it's already taken 1.5 years to develop 2 of those pieces in the collection, and you've got another 98 to go. It's like, at that rate, it's not going to happen, you know.
Yeah. And I think having someone
guidance.
Having someone, exactly, and I think having someone to provide that guidance, I think it comes with that naivety of having not done something before, but being like, I get, you know, like I always talk about it with social media, that everyone uses social media, so they assume that they can run social media for a brand, and it's such a different kettle of fish. But it's the same thing, like we all wear clothes, so, you know, of course I'll just get them to make the jumper in that way or whatever. And as you say, different factories will have different techniques. You work to a different gauge or whatever, and having that guidance from someone like yourself, I think it's something that you need from the beginning, but you don't realize that you need it until you're partway down the road.
Yeah, and I think that's like going back earlier when I said about Albam's starting products. They wouldn't even pass as first samples now. That's a real case in point, because you just know more. And even now, making in a factory, all products to me are the same. Design-wise and getting something right, there are people that I have that I would call on to say, client X, or I want to do this certain, I want to get this V right, or this knit right, want it to look like this. And it's their experience that will be like, oh, you know, this is how you want to word it on the tech pack. It's this gauge, it's this tension, da-da-da-da-da. Stuff that I don't know, but I know who does know, and I'll listen to them. And they're brilliant. That particular person is just hands down the best knitwear designer I've ever met. And it saves time and money.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, this is I go back to at the beginning of the journey. You're trying to be as frugal as possible. Most people are trying to be as frugal as possible. And so they look at a consultancy fee and it will seem expensive, but it's that whole thing of it's expensive when you're 3 years down the line, you've done 8 prototypes and you're still not selling anything. That's when it's expensive, and it'd be far more affordable to front load it.
Yeah, and there are good ones and bad ones in everything, and like for some people, I don't work well with that. Like it's just it's not a match, and I think that's one consultant isn't the same as another, and then there are agents as well, which are a different thing. Like they have experience, but kind of really just want the order because they get the commission on the order.
Commission.
And my view on consultants or agents is not my view on them is because I think they're really valuable. I think agents are worth their weight in gold when they're really good. And the Albam agent, when I was making here, was brill. I could call her up and she could approve. I trusted her to approve lab dips, deal with problems. She was one of the team. That's how it is, rather than I'll get another employee because that's another headcount. Then they've got to go over, and invariably you can't afford the ones that you really want. So so there were compromises all the way, and lean, frugal. They're all those things. But my guiding light in working with other brands is let's just make the best possible product we can. And that sounds really trite because it's also really subjective. But it's like whatever anyone feels about sustainability or consumption is, just make it really well. And I think that answers a lot of questions. It will have an associated cost with it if you want to make a very expensive product very well, but you could also go, right, this needs to hit this price marker. How do we make it for that? And that's a really exciting challenge. I think it's kind of understanding the parameters, because why is a Mont Blanc pen any better or worse than a Bic Biro? They just have different parameters. They're both brilliant pens and they say different things, but I'm not going to apply principles of one to the other than performance. Does it write really well, and then really well subjective. So that's kind of my thing working with.
Well, I guess
others.
And now that's a really nice segue to, so you're now setting up another brand with more experience, with more knowledge, with more wisdom, and that same ethos with your consultancy, I'm assuming, is going to apply to Peace, your new brand.
Yes, it is. I think I've had enough time out of, or enough rest from doing my own thing with Albam, and dabbled in a couple of other things, podcasts and magazines and a bit of publishing and other stuff along the way, and then realised I love product. Like, actually, I love product. I love making clothes. I find it a lovely space, if not slightly stressful and annoying and all of those things. But isn't that life? But I feel ready to present something, a refreshed version of my idea, because I also believe we just have one idea, and then we repurposed and repropose that idea in different guises as we age, etc., and that kind of becomes the style, and you can repropose it in different markets. But yeah, creating a new brand in what seems like a totally different world of struggle and strife. But when we opened the door of our first store, Lehman Brothers shut their door as the banking world collapsed. So, and we went into a recession and did quite well. So it's just the natural cycle of things, I think.
Huh. That's an interesting, but that was definitely an interesting kind of like coalescence of things going on, because everyone would tell you, like, what are you doing launching now? We're in a recession. And often I think if you can,
always a time.
if you can succeed or survive in a recession, it means that you have the foundation and you're there as things start to grow. But with Peace, and you said we'd kind of come back to it, because you were talking about like kind of jeans and a t-shirt with Albam and having one idea. Obviously, I'm assuming this is the kind of the look and the aesthetic feel for Peace, but there's more around it now.
There is more around it. It's still, I realised as I was, and it's taken a while to kind of come to that like I've had the name and wanting to do something for 4 or 5 years, and then different iterations of samples and going, it's not quite right, doing things that were in the market, like going, oh, I'll do a version of that, and it just never, it's like, oh, it's not me. It didn't feel authentic to me. And actually the samples didn't turn out great. Like none of it felt a smooth process, and that was kind of just keep on chipping away, and it got to a really nice place, but returned to, there are other bits, but it's like you could say it's jeans and a white t-shirt again, because that's what I've always worn. That's what I continue to wear. I've just got older, more discerning, or different ways of doing it. And I think there's just a nice aesthetic. You get to your 40s and life seems different, and don't want to fall into any stereotypical groups, which is kind of easy to do. Or you're 40 now, you should dress in a certain way.
Sure, yeah.
Or you're 50 and you should dress in a certain way, or you're this, that, and the other. I want to look slick and presentable, but at ease, comfortable, and right for the moment I'm in. A lot of the time that is jeans and a white t-shirt, but we're doing some tailoring, some sports gear. Like the aesthetics kind of gone from my life, which is jeans and a white t-shirt, to playing tennis, to wanting to build something. So you need attire appropriate, or appropriate attire for the time you're wearing, but it's not old school menswear. It's just it's kind of a modern take on.
Well, and it's developing, isn't it?
Album.
You're establishing that. I know that you have very clear ideas about how it's going to look and how it's going to feel, but it's at that stage where it's being developed. You're doing the samples, and but going beyond that. Yeah, and I know it's a difficult question to answer, but because success can take so many different forms, and potentially with Albam, you didn't really know what success looked like, but you just kind of one step in front of the other, open another store, keep going. Do you have a much clearer idea now that you're at the age that you are of what success is going to look like for Peace?
I think it means a few things. Nicely profitable. On a business sense, rather than going, I want to be doing, I want 500 stores worldwide and to be, X billions of turnover. And it might happen that way. I don't know. That would change things up. But nicely profitable, so I can adventure with some stability in there. I love retail stores, so if I could have nicely profitable retail stores in all the main world cities, London, Paris, LA, Lisbon, New York, 10 of those, all nicely profitable, obviously that would be great. I would love my son to be able to see that you can have an idea and make it work, and have a lot of fun doing it, and use it as a vehicle to meet people. And have more of those conversations and kind of bring people through, and give people a chance. So I think if I could do all of those things, I would view that as pretty successful.
Yeah, which is funny, isn't it? Because when you say it, it sounds, oh, well, that sounds fairly simple. But of course, the reality is always more complex than that. But it's great I think having those goals and having what does success look like is a really important part from the beginning.
Yeah, and there are no metrics, but I think they can evolve over time as it gets going. Metrics are important, but I don't want to be hamstrung by them right from the get-go.
Well, you're in Porto at the moment, and am I right, the intention is to move to Lisbon in order to set up your first store there?
That has been an idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of, again, remembering those first conversations about Albam, going, if you're going to do something, go to a place where there are more people, etc. Whilst Portugal's a great place to make things, its kind of domestic economy isn't at the same level as Northern Europe and Northern European cities, whereas because the wages are relatively low on a Northern European scale, but then Lisbon, being the capital, it's just a totally different city. It also has a lot of tourists, a lot of those being French. The French are very elegant. They do enjoy nice product, nice things. So when we go down there, we're seeing this Lisbon developing into a kind of a world city where it's lots of French, so the tastes change, but lots of French, lots of Americans, and it's a business, so you kind of go where the money is. So it feels like Lisbon's good. It's also on the world map. Porto's on the world map, but it might just be quieter. That's not to say Porto couldn't probably take it. Again, that idea of being nicely profitable, they just need to be nicely profitable. But where do you do the first one?
Yeah, because I think it's glass ceilings, isn't it? It's understanding where the glass ceiling is, and if you're willing to accept that there will be less income because there's less tourism, you're maybe looking at a more local demographic. If you're talking about the retail store in isolation rather than looking at online at all, then there's your glass ceiling. And in order to raise that glass ceiling, potentially there's more risk that needs to be taken. There's more upheaval because you have to move, new schools, new places to live, new friends, all that sort of stuff. And it's deciding, do you need to do that from the beginning? That's going to be something that I guess you're gonna get to.
We'll explore it. And again, I think things can be done in stages. I'm a believer in doing things in stages, and just working towards things. Otherwise, so you can keep it moving and momentum, and things happen when you start getting momentum. Good things happen that you hadn't planned, etc. Chance meetings. Lisbon seems to be a good place to voice from, actually, to then go out, the light's great, the location's good, it offers certain things, but we'll see. Porto's equally that, that like that.
Yeah, so
it depends how you spin it.
You're saying that moving to Lisbon isn't a decider. It doesn't have to happen in order to make the brand happen. It could be an option that's worth exploring.
Yeah, I think it will come down to being what's the word? Like, it's a recipe, but we'll just pick those components. Because I was speaking to earlier this week a PR from London who has links with certain publications that I want. So you're trying to make this kind of patchwork in a way, this kind of net that you can put around. Because you need the English bit. I have awareness in the UK for Albam, so it makes certain parts easier. Don't really have awareness of me and Albam in Lisbon, so it makes press a bit harder. But then more of the press are based in London, New York than they are in Lisbon. So you're just trying to find the right place. Just try to develop your own recipe that makes it interesting for people to.
And I'm really interested to see how that network that you've created over the years of being involved in the same industry, different elements of it, and as you say, you kind of dipped in and out of other things, but there has been this ongoing thread of the clothing side of things, and so the network that exists around that, the PR agencies, individuals, and all that side of things. I'm really interested to see, because I haven't had that. I'm going to be really interested to see how that accelerates your awareness and growth potentially.
Yeah, and that's the bit that what I do know is I'm really pleased with the product thus far. I'm really pleased and proud with what I and we as the factories have made. Then it's adding the visual language to it, which is interesting. which I think will also be really pleased and proud of that. And then there is that element of luck, but it's really nice product. It fits me and the people that have tried it on well and nicely. Might not be someone else's style, but then it's about finding. The world is such a big place, and then it's like just always when it can get overwhelming. I'm then just reminding myself, going, I just need the people that it targets, that it aligns with. I don't need everyone. I don't need to, it's just those people that I can speak to, and of which, how do I find them around the world? And then I kind of bring myself back to, okay, that's quite simple. And then,
it's trying to have that mindset of abundance. There's 8 billion people on the planet. Now, 8 billion people aren't your target audience, but 8 billion is an enormous number. So if you can just get to a percentage of those people, again, price of admission, having good product, then, and having the right visual language so that it resonates with those people, then in that it seems quite simple, but it is just that process of getting in front of them. But yeah, so I mean, as I say, I'm definitely very excited to see how things develop with Peace. I think you are in a really unique position with your experience and your location and your the connection with the factories, and not just the connection, but those relationships. And I think that you've got a huge amount to give through this process that we're doing with the podcast. So yeah, it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I think it is. Like on all parts. The same with you and Barnfield and how we've met, and then those kind of your experience of the digital marketing side of things, which we have conversations. It's, you just realise how little you know, and then you know about one thing, not you, but one.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And then, and then piecing those things together. Although it might feel like that sometimes when you're making clothes, but I feel the same, that I know nothing about digital marketing. But then one does have an idea, and then actually I'm a tradesman in certain bits and an artist in others, I guess, and vice versa. So yeah, I think it's just a great thing to make, and everyone I think everyone should find their own way of making something, although it might not look like a product. It might look just like being part of a team, but I'm sure we'll get to those combos later.
We will, and I think we'll leave it there. There's a bit of editing to do to stitch this all together, but I think there's some real gems in there, and we'll leave it there. So I'll catch up with you next week.
Next week.
All right. Speak to you then.
Ciao.
Bye.